courage, faith, and determination. These are the beliefs that mark the history of Black Americans in the United States, the South, and in Florida.
My father got to stand in silent judgment. He got to stand. He's for
Africa, home of the black man, woman, and child. In such exotically named places as Kundi Sela, Ghana, Mali, and the Kingdom of Songhai, African families were torn apart, many never to see each other again. White slavers, urged on by profits during the Commercial Revolution, showed little mercy, if any. It has been estimated that between 10 and 14 million slaves were imported into the New World from Africa. In view of the great numbers that were killed while resisting capture and the additional numbers that died during transatlantic passage, the total numbers are staggering. It is to be remembered that the traders would have none but the best available natives. They demanded the healthiest, the largest, the youngest, and the most culturally advanced. The vast majority of the slaving was carried on in West Africa. Africa would provide the labor to America. America would then ship the natural products like lumber, grain, and furs to Europe. The Old World would then provide textiles and hardware to the colonies. The Industrial Revolution, the invention of the cotton gin, the extension of slavery into new territories, and the persistence of the slave trade into the 19th century all were critical elements in firmly establishing slavery in the United States. However, anti-slavery sentiment in the North increased steadily after 1815 as more ministers, editors, and other leaders of public opinion spoke out against the evils of the institution. These pronounced evils led to the Civil War, which bitterly divided the country. Names such as Gettysburg, Bull Run, Vicksburg, and the Wilderness are still mournfully remembered. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had been issued on New Year's Day, 1863, but to those blacks in the South, it meant very little. In fact, very few knew of it until after the war. The surrender of the Confederate Army in April 1865 meant victory not only for the powerful military forces of the North, but also for the blacks still in slavery. Approximately 4 million blacks were now free, but with little or no formal education and no knowledge of public affairs, many wandered the countryside in search of work. In west central Florida, 30 miles east of Tampa in eastern Hillsborough County, the slaves learned of their freedom on May 20th, 1865. Ethel Glover is the great-granddaughter of Mary Reddick, who is considered the founding mother of the community.
Well, my great-grandmother said that when they heard that they were free, that they were just so happy that they were free, they just went out and went to digging up dirt, digging up land with their bare hands, that they were just that free. They were just that happy to be free slaves.
In Bealsville, the names of the original settlers are still remembered with honor and affection. Stephen Allen, Ike Berry, and Peter Dexter, the man who learned surveying skills as a slave, laid out the original homesteads. Neptune Henry, Mills Holloman, and these three men, Bryant Horton, Roger Smith, and Robert Story, searched out and selected the site for Bealsville's first religious service. The final members are Sam McKinney, Abe Seginger, Jerry Stevens, and Mary Reddick, a house slave who raised two families, one black and another referred to as her fair children.
They were a mixed group of slaves. Large numbers of them were sons of the plantation owners. The early settlers that settled here came from the plantations around this area. All around this area, there were 12 original families. Slaves were allowed to meet and congregate on one of the plantation owners' places until they could find homes.
During the Reconstruction period, the Joseph Howell plantation in nearby Spring Head served as a base for many of the ex-slaves while they established homes for themselves and their families.
I have heard that my husband's grandmother, Sarah Howell, helped them a great deal, and they give her credit for it. Even some of the older people down there today do, that she helped out. She was a kind of a wealthy woman, but you know, at the end of the Civil War, there was no money. But when they killed beef or when hogs, or they had syrup cane grindings, that they shared with them.
Sure that there are other instances, if that was the case with Bealsville, where their former owners did exert themselves to see to it that the freedmen were given a start in life. But by and large, it was like Frederick Douglass said, stood them naked in the field, no shelter over their heads and no place to turn.
I'm sure that she furnished clothing as much as she could. You know, they didn't have a whole lot of things. We didn't, as I said, this was not a cotton-growing area. But as for food and any other help, I'm sure that she gave to them. That is the report that I've had of her.
The settlers would go backward and forward to their masters where they came from. They looked out for them pretty good. And that's the way my grandfather did. They would see that he got home, you know. If he got in a tight, they would, as much as they could, because at that time everybody were kind of on the lean side.
During the period immediately after the Civil War, the Reconstruction era, blacks acquired the right to vote. The impact in Florida was immediate. In 1867, Jonathan C. Gibbs was appointed Florida's Secretary of State. However, for most black Floridians, earning a living was more than difficult. Many families became sharecroppers, depending almost entirely on the old system for their survival. The labor of black Americans literally built the economic base for the Southeast. In the harshest of conditions, these people not only cleaned, but cooked, sewed, tended children, and labored in construction under the hot Florida sun. This sweat and muscle hardened the foundation for the population that was soon to migrate to Florida in the early 20th century.
Black labor had certainly tamed the Florida jungle with brush hook and axe and two-man saw and grubbing up the palmetto roots and getting in the ditches with the moccasins and building the roads with shovels and laying tracks with sledgehammers like John Henry.
Originally, the community was called Alafia because of the nearby Alafia River. Since another area further south had the same name, in 1923 the neighbors renamed their community Bealsville in honor of Alfred Beal, who helped reclaim land lost through mortgage foreclosure.
Biggest recollections of my grandfather is the straightforwardness and the way he tried to teach right from wrong. He believed in it. He taught to his children, and his children taught to their children, and most of their children still believe it.
One of the most important elements which helped the people of Bealsville endure was land ownership. When ex-slaves acquired land, there were unrelenting forces to take it away.
There was a Southwide conspiracy, if you please, throughout the white population to see to it that the liberated blacks were kept in the status of landless, skillless labor pool available to the white community. And for that reason, keeping them from acquiring arable land was primary.
People in Bealsville were able to do anything. In many instances, it was to keep possession of the land in families, and as the longer you keep it, the more symbolically important it becomes.
O.V. is the great-grandson of Brian Horton. O.V. has been farming in Bealsville for 65 of his 80 years and remembers some of his grandfather Horton's stories.
They just love farming. They just love to till the soil. That's decided it. I know I can be contented and not going to do anything until I hear somebody's tractor. Then I got to go. It just wakes me up to see somebody else moving, tilling the soil, planting, whatever. It does something to you. That's when you really got it in your blood.
Protecting the land is so ingrained in the minds of the people, it has almost become a tradition. Many won't sell land to outsiders, especially speculators.
I try to keep it in the family. I haven't sold any, not of this that my grandfather gave me. The land possession has changed quite a bit, of course, with new purposes of use for the land. Commercialization, establishment of attractions for tourists and transient people, and to be able to hold on to the land and manage the legal machinery which would keep it in one family has been a very difficult thing to do. And you can't drive into Bealsville or come here for the first time and not be impressed by the sense of space, not merely the fat lands and the soil that is tilled, but the ambience of the people here. It is that they are not crowded to death and that they have the possibility of some say-so in their lives. And I think that is really what this country is, one of the things that this country is all about.
Inez is the great-granddaughter of Brian Horton and the cousin to O.V.
Well, my granddad always told us that keep your land, just stuff and keep it anyhow. And it's very important because that's where we came from. That's where we got our living, from the land. And my granddaddy and those, they're not like these young people now. They sell land to anybody. But, they had to have a good reputation to get the land a long time ago. Because Mr. Getberry and my granddaddy and these old man, white men, they would go around and find out just what kind of personality you had. So they sold land. They didn't sell land to anybody like they do now.
It doesn't take long for a visitor to understand that the land does give forth a feeling of security and peace.
You live where a rooster crows in the morning, as here in Bealsville, and there are cattle in the fields and crops in the ground. Then you have a lifestyle which, regardless of all else, makes for a way of life and a type of person and an inner strength.
This strength has always been nourished by the church, and there is no doubt that the slave experience is to be viewed as a triumph of the human spirit over adversity. In the past 120 years, the American black has come face to face with intimidation, isolation, repression, and segregation. Many of our country's leaders have devoted themselves body and soul to the quest for equality and justice, and the leaders of the church have stood their ground.
But I want you to know that I am back in St. Augustine not merely to make speeches to you, but I'm back here to go back to jail if necessary.
Progress has been made, but there are still problems to be dealt with.
At historic Tampa on the Gulf of Mexico stands a university boasting one of the new departments born of modern needs, the Department of Interpersonal and Intercultural Relations, aimed at the scientific eradication of interracial strife and social bigotry. From Tampa University go speakers to clubs, colleges, and political groups throughout the land, all working for Americanism in practice.
I have a disposition to take off my hat to the adventurous white people of the South who have said that they intend to break away from what their fathers did and what their grandfathers did.
The freed men and women wanted to give thanks and pray for their future and their children's future. Throughout the South and in Bealsville, the very first religious services were held outside.
And when the log cabins were finished and they had homes of their own, because all the place was covered with trees, pines. And when they had their homes all finished, then they organized and had built a church, a lean-to church under an old fallen oak. The first church was the Antioch Church, which everybody attended. Other churches have.
The congregation was held together by the devout Bryant Horton.
They would meet together, have pep rally talks, and be encouraged and enlightened by fellow brother Horton. And he would encourage them and inspire them to stick together, be strong, and they could make it and become a great people. And through the years, we've always survived, and we've been an organized church since 1868.
From one generation to the other. I can agree with the person that established church from the very beginning, that they had values, high values, and they passed it down to all of us.
Some weekdays you can find Ida at the Bealsville Community Center, spending time with some of her oldest friends. This county-run building is slowly becoming the social center of the neighborhood, but Antioch is still fondly thought of.
Antioch is a combined force that everybody feel each other's care. And some of us, quite a few of us are still there, and we just kind of hold things that hold us together.
They could have their meetings, and whenever anything came up, they would go to the church and thrash it out. All the families got together, and anything that was wrong, they would get it straight some kind of way. Sure.
Today, there are 5 churches in Bealsville. Only a few hundred yards down Horton Road, you can find Mount Olive African Methodist Episcopal Church by simply listening to the hymns coming from within.
But beyond physical survival, there's another kind of survival, which is intertwined with it, which is psychological survival, or spiritual survival. And this is, of course, the role that the church plays. And churches, there is the whole given belief system, the dogma that brings people together, the things that they believe. But beyond that, what you can see is the ritual. And of course, you can go into any church, Christian church, whether it's rural or an urban church, white church and a black church, and you will see the ritual, and it always involves music. Maybe one of the major kinds of bonding things in a community. Ask how much time this community puts into its music. The chorus takes a lot of time, a lot of training, it takes money to buy the clothes. A great deal of love goes into that, and we know what kind of a force music is. The whole preaching, the whole poetic form of preaching is another emotionally binding thing. But in addition to that, coming together as people in the ritual, eating together afterwards, that's characteristic of all. I think certainly of all these small towns, and you'll find it over in Mayak, along the Mayak River in the white church. It's just exactly the way you find it here. So the shared parents, but that's a psychological thing. How do you handle the things you can't handle? The guy with a whip and the guy's taking your land. You handle it by going beyond and getting that kind of depth that you need, and that's what the church does.
If you teach your children when they're young religion, teach the religion then, it grows up in them, and that's the way I felt it come up in me and the rest of my brothers and sisters.
Children represent the future, and the men and women of Bealsville have always known this. Educating their children morally, socially, and academically has always been a top priority. Few men and women can forget the courage it took for James Meredith a Florida high school graduate, to register as the first black student at the University of Mississippi. Nor can we forget the Freedom Riders, young black and white students who put themselves at risk so all could have equal rights to education. The original settlers were no different.
In the early days, there was no school. About 1878, and the citizens wanted a school. And there was no one around, not many people around that was able to read and to write. And the old man, William Glover, knew of one of his son-in-laws up at Sanford, Florida, who could read and write, and was a teacher. So he went up to Sanford, Florida, and brought his son-in-law down, John Matthews, as the first teacher that was paid by the county, $25 a month.
In 1931, Sam Horton, W.O. Beale, and W.B. Ben Glover launched a financial drive to build a new school.
Citizens Committee gave to the Hillsborough County school system 10 acres of land for the school and $1,100 which they had raised. Well, they said, well, we named the school after one of the older citizens, and that's how it got its name. And they wouldn't name it for the chairman of the Citizens Committee, so they named it for his father, which was William Glover.
Glover School has a proud history, and many of its students have gone on to reflect its excellence.
There was more than just educational training. It was more of training for life. They taught us moral values. They taught us how to be honest, how to live a life of integrity, and it taught us the more weightier things of life, not just education, but just more or less an extension of the training that you get from your family.
One thing about Glover School, it built in stability, it built in love, security. It just was the heart of our community. All the men, I don't care where they go, they don't mind telling you, I went to school at Glover. Glover looks real bad now, but Glover has stood tall. Yes, sir.